Hey, talking to myself. Welcome to the podcast. I know that you gon' feel Dave Sands the second, talking movies and gaming, even anime. Yeah, I might just go Super Saiyan. 242, the Bahamas, we gon' rep. Don't be anxious about nothing. Philippians 4:6. Sharing about my life, sharing about God's truth. Always keep it real when I'm talking to myself. Let's go.
Mic check, 1, 2, 3. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Talking to Myself podcast. Wow. I guess we are a real podcast. We made it to episode 2. Come on, now. Come on. Can I get some claps in the audience? We made it to episode 2. Wow. I hope you enjoyed episode 1. Even though that was so hard for me to press that record button and start that episode, I am happy that I did it. And now here we are in episode 2. I can't believe we're here. And so if you enjoy this podcast, wherever you're listening to it, leave a 5-star review or whatever rating system, you know what I mean? If you're enjoying it, let me know. Message me, DM me, let me know if you're enjoying it. And so we have another exciting episode for you today. I was kind of in between topics as to what I wanted to discuss within this episode, and I think I know what I wanted to discuss. So we got some great personal stories, we got a little bit of season talk, and let's kind of jump right into it. So before we get into, I guess, the main part of the podcast, which is kind of talking about like seasons and what seasons we're in and where everybody's at, including myself, I remembered a story that I can't believe I forgot, but it kind of came to my brain. So for those who may not know, I went to a school, university, called Acadia University, which is located in Wolfville, Nova Scotia in Canada. And so imagine that you have the city, like the main city, which is called Halifax. And so you would take your plane to Halifax, and then you would drive down for maybe was it like 2 hours? I think 2 hours, maybe a little bit more depending on traffic. And then boom, you hit Wolfville, which is the rural area of Nova Scotia. I talking cows, blah, blah, blah. And so my university was a university town. So Acadia was on this hill. And so you kind of have to walk up the hill to get to, the dorms and get to meal hall. And then if you were to come down the hill, that's where you get into the town of Wolfville. So you have your restaurants, your grocery stores, things like that. And I just remembered this story of how I stole something from a grocery store. Wait, don't. FBI, hold on. It gets good. It gets better. Don't lock me up. You hear me? You hear me? Was that statute of limitations? I think I already crossed that. No, I actually haven't. I don't know. But hear me out on this story for a second. So I can't remember in what year it was, but I think it was my second year. In Canada, you don't really go by freshman, senior, how in the US, you go by, frosh in year 1, then year 2, year 3, and then year 4. That's how the lineup of how you would call yourself, what year of university you're in. And so I remember going to the grocery store. And so, like I said, I'd walk down from my residence down the Acadia Hill, and I'd go into the town, and I believe that was Sobeys. If anyone remembers, who went to Acadia, I think it was the Sobeys next to the RBC at the time, right? And so I went into Sobeys, and I was probably just buying some juice, probably some cough drops, because, that cold always had me messed up in every way possible. And then I picked up something else. I can't remember what the exact item was, but I was going to pay for it. But I just put it in my pocket and forgot to pay it out at checkout. And so once I got to the register, I paid for everything that was in my cart, swipe, boom, boom, beep, everything was paid for. And so I remember I had my stuff. Now I'm taking that trot to walk up the hill. Now, side note, if you didn't want to take that trot up the hill, you could catch a taxi. The taxi service is called CJ's Taxis. Why do I remember that name? Because I took the taxi all the time. And so, yeah, I guess that day, or I think that was the evening, that evening or that night, just took the walk, saved some money, whatever. So walking up the hill, I get to my dorm. And I feel my pocket, right? And I was like, what's this in my pocket? And then I was like, oh, I didn't pay for this. A couple things ran through my mind. Number one, I got to pay for this. Number two, I'm going to jail, right? I can't go to jail. Not me. Dave don't belong in no jail, right? And of course, every grocery store has security cameras. So it was just like, how would it look for me to have stolen something from Sobeys? Remember, I'm not from Canada. I'm a Bahamian. I'm on student visa, brother. I can't lose my student visa. I can't. I love Canada. I was enjoying my time there. So I did the only logical thing that a logical person would do. And that was to sprint, run all the way down the hill back to Sobeys to the grocery store. And I remember I went to the same person who checked me out. I was just like, I'm so sorry. Listen, I forgot to check this out. Thankfully, she kind of knew who I was. So it's just like, no problem. Then we checked it out and it was like, boom, bop, beep, paid for that, boom. Your boy is a law-abiding citizen. I ain't going to no jail for no mitts. You know what I mean? So that was just a funny story. That doesn't tie into anything that we're talking about today. But that was just a really funny story that I recalled at work this week. And so, yeah. Moral of the story is, don't put your stuff in your pocket at the grocery store because you may forget and, you should probably pay that off. Anyways, yeah, that's the story. But what I really wanted to get into is the discussion about seasons. And when I say seasons, I don't mean like salt and pepper and your garlic powders. I'm not talking about your summer, winter, no. I'm talking about the seasons of life that everybody goes through. What season each person is in. And there are many different seasons that I went through in my life at 27 years old. And so before I kind of get into stories, I think it's important to kind of reference what the Bible talks about seasons. So we're going to be looking at Ecclesiastes chapter 3. I really wanted to read this. First and foremost, Ecclesiastes, the book itself, is known, or the book is about trying to figure out the purpose of life. Who wrote it? It says here in my study Bible, because the study Bible, oh my goodness, best investment ever. Well, I'll have another podcast on that. But it says that King Solomon wrote it at the end of his life, but others suggest that there was a later author. So we know that King Solomon wrote a lot of this, but there could have been other authors as well. And so, like I mentioned earlier, Ecclesiastes is the book of figuring out the purpose of life. And listen to me, Solomon was spitting in here. I'm going to talk about Ecclesiastes 2 in a very separate podcast, but man, Ecclesiastes 2 was spit into me today, bro. But Ecclesiastes 3, so I'm going to be reading from the New Living Translation. Why I'm reading from the New Living Translation, it's a very simple translation to understand, and I found it really helpful. So I'm just going to read a few verses from that, and then we're going to dive right into it. Okay, great. So Ecclesiastes chapter 3, let's begin. For everything there is a season, a time for every activity under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to harvest, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to cry and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to turn away, a time to search and a time to quit. Was that right? A time to embrace and a time to turn away, a time to search and a time to quit searching. There we go. A time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be quiet and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. Now we're on verse 9. What do people really get for all their hard work? ? I have seen the burden God has placed on us all. Yet God has made everything beautiful for its own time. And I think I'll stop right there. That is Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 to 11. Oh, let me finish the last part, 11. He has planted eternity in the human heart, but even so, people cannot see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to end. And so, what is King Solomon saying in this chapter? And so, thankfully, this study Bible has notes, but this is I found this like a very simple chapter to understand. King Solomon is really just saying that there is a time and place for everything in life. And he kind of talked about the extremes, right? A time to be born and a time to die, a time to tear down, a time to build up. And yeah, he just kind of talked about just the different times of life, and he looked at those different extremes. And what I kind of took from this is that there is a time for everything. Like, we can plan what we want in this life, but ultimately, we're on God's time. We're on God's plan. My church does this thing where we kind of like select, or right, the pastors kind of like select the men to like do prayers on certain days. And when I do the prayer, I would sometimes say, God, just allow us to know that your plan is always the best plan. And I think Ecclesiastes 3 verse 11 kind of just rounds out that point from a biblical perspective. It says, again, yet God has made everything beautiful for its own time. And right there, that kind of puts a little bit more meat on what I actually say in the prayer. Everything is beautiful under God's time. Now, see, God's timing can be very different from our time, and I've experienced that in so many facets of my life. But I think it's important to first understand seasons from a biblical perspective. And so I think King Solomon kind of gave a lot of game, and it gave us a lot of context. And so why I wanted to talk about seasons is because we all go through seasons in our life, right? For me personally, I had numerous seasons. I had my university season, I had my CPA season, and now I'm in my 27-year-old season of life. And so I was trying to think about where I'm at in life. What season am I in right now? And the season that I feel that I'm in right now is a season of trying, right? I'll explain that. For the last few weeks, I've had the same weekend, the same style weekend. My weekends used to be, I'd wake up, get some brekkie, take a shower whenever. Then I would just watch anime all day. I'm watching One Piece right now. Really good show. We'll talk about that and maybe like a separate thing, whatever. But that was my weekend for like 4 weeks straight. And mind you, that was me. That was my fault because I was trying to catch up in One Piece to like where I was at in the show. But I lived that same weekend over and over and over again. And when you do that, it gets boring. When you have the same monotony, ooh, that's a word, huh? I hope that was using the right text and the right context. But when you have that same monotony of life over and over again, it gets stale, it gets boring. I found myself like saying, like, what am I doing right now, bro? I would scroll on IG and everyone's kind of just living their lives and doing activities. And so I was just like, I need to change. I have to change. I can't have the same weekend for 5 weeks in a row. And so there was 1 week, which is last week when I'm recording this, but there was a week when I said, you know what? I'm going to try. I'm going to try things. I'm going to do things out of my comfort zone. And I want to see how I feel around that, because I don't know for anybody else, but at 27 years old, I love my comfort zone. My comfort zone is where I lie. The four walls of my room is my comfort zone. I know where my bed is. I know where the games are. I know where the shoes are. I sometimes know where the ants are. You know what I mean? I know where everything is. But you can't live a fruitful life doing the same thing. And truthfully, you won't get new experiences staying in your room. This is the things I had to kind of tell myself, like, if I really want to have like a fruitful life, I have to do things. right? I got to take some risk. And I'm not talking about risk in terms of like a terrible financial risk or jumping off a building or anything like that. I'm just talking about developing myself more in areas where I know I could develop and doing more things. And in 1 week, where I did so many activities, I talked about in the last episode, I went to the Jesus March. But also during that same week, I assisted with making the posters. Or was it posters? Or the signs, excuse me. Yes, the signs. And I made designs, and I was able to like see those designs during the march, and it was like a really good feeling to like see like the designs that, not that I came up with, because I Googled them boys and I was like tracing them, whatever, but seeing that I made an impact in that way, and that felt so good. And I did so much stuff in that 1 week. I met so many new people, bro. And what I realize is the more times I get out of my comfort zone and the more times I try, then I experience a lot more life. I get to meet new people. I get to experience new activities. And then people may want to join me in those activities. And even if people don't want to join me, I'm going to still do those things. Where did I first see this actually? When I first tried something, and I kind of made that tie this week, but a movie was coming out, I think a couple months ago. Yes, it was a couple months ago. It came out this year, called Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. And let me tell y'all something. That film, that masterpiece of animation is the best film, first of all, it's the best animated film I've ever watched, but it's also the best film ever, okay? That's a big cosign, I know. Trust me, watch it. Is there a language warning? No, it's PG. Like 1 or 2, like, close to the things, but it's PG, so you'll enjoy it. But nonetheless, it was such a good movie. And I knew it was going to be a good movie. And the week that it came out, I was like, bro, I have to see this movie. I have to see this film. But I had no persons to go with. I asked some people, everyone's busy, you know what it is, And I really wanted to go. I really wanted to see it. Even my dad was willing to go with me, and I appreciate him so much for doing that, because I told him I got to watch this film in VIP at Fusion Superplex, which is our movie theater in the Bahamas. But I was just like, no, Dad, I have someone to go with. Time now, I have no one to go with. Anyway, I remember that evening, I was just like, buddy, are you going to this film? Talking to myself now, hence the name of the podcast, talking to myself. I was just like, buddy, are we going to this podcast? Are we going to this movie? And I remember I was just on Fusion's site, kind of going back and forth, like, should I pull the trigger? Should I not? Should I buy this ticket? Whatever. And I pulled the trigger. Right? I bought the movie ticket in VIP like I wanted, because for this film, I didn't need them chicken tenders and fries. I didn't need a comfortable seat. So I did it. The next day I woke up, I was just a little nervous, man. I was just like, man, I've never went to the movies by myself. I never did before, ever. So this was the first time. I mean, did I go by myself before? I mean, in the sense of like when I went away, like my parents and like my family went into one movie, I went to another. But this was like the first time, I guess, let's say at 27 years old or 26 at the time. It was the first time as a like full-fledged adult, I guess, where I said I'm going to the movies by myself, right? And so I remember the drive to Fusion felt so long. I was just like, man, will people think I'm weird? How will I react? I've never been in this type of scenario before, and I didn't know how I was going to react. I didn't know how my emotions were going to be. But I got to Fusion, went up that escalator, sat in my seat. And listen to me. I had the best time at the movies by myself. The best time. Because I was able to do whatever I wanted. I could react to the film in any way. I don't have to worry about somebody else. Not saying I wouldn't go to the movies with my boys or any of my friends, But I'm just saying I was just able to be present with that beautiful film, and I was able to take it all in for me. It was personal to me, and I was able to make a very uncomfortable situation very exciting and very enjoyable for me. And what I learned from that experience was like, man, you got to go live. You got to go enjoy life. And I'm not saying do anything crazy, but what I am saying is don't be afraid to do things alone. Don't be afraid to try things, because on the other side of fear, which is just an emotion, there's a lot of joy. And even so, why are we worrying about these things? You know what I mean? Philippians 4 verse 6, which is one of my favorite verses, it says, don't be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. You don't got to be afraid. Don't be anxious. 2 Timothy 1 verse 7, which was another one. I learned a lot of anxiety verses because I get nervous a lot. For the Lord hath not given us the spirit of fear, but one of power, love, and a sound mind. Again, no need to fear. You know what I mean? So it was just such a surreal moment to now kind of circle back now and to be in like this trying season, bro. I want to do things to enhance my life. There are people that want to do things with me. I sometimes think that, I'm lonely. People don't want to hang out with me. That's such a false narrative that I made up in my own head. People do. You just got to ask, bro. That's what I've been realizing. Just ask. If people can't make it, fine, then you could still do it. If they can't make it, great. Icing on the cake. So I say all this to say that I hope that those who are my age or those who may be younger listening to this, that you're still trying, still wanting to experience new things, because there is so much life out there. There's so many things to enjoy. And so don't let fear hold you back. And tying this back to seasons, we're all going to be going through different seasons, right? There'll be different times. This may not be the season for you to try. You know, that might be the next season for you. You know, you might be in your study season, your CPA season, your ACCA season, or just in a healing season. Whatever season you're going through, know that God has made everything in his own time. Know that the Lord has your back. Know that he has not forgotten about you. And just because I'm in this trying season right now doesn't mean I can't be in another season next week. You know what I mean? But I think we all just need to understand that God is truly in control, and that he really and truly has a plan for us that is exceedingly and abundantly greater than anything that we can imagine. And I know it's easier said than done, because I mean, the saying goes, I'm human just like everyone listening to this. It is hard to figure out the plan. It's hard to be patient. But knowing that God has a season for our lives and knowing that he has not forgotten us, man, that gives me a lot of relief. And so I think the final thing I want to tie with this is the Serenity Prayer, which I forget all the time. My dad reminds me about it, but I always forget it. I don't know. I just forget it. I need to memorize it. But for those who never heard the Serenity Prayer, it goes like this. It says, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And man, that's so deep. We need to accept the things that we cannot change and have the courage to change the things that we can. And we just need the wisdom to know the difference between the two. You know what I mean? Such a beautiful prayer and such a beautiful chapter in Ecclesiastes 3. I definitely recommend the book of Ecclesiastes. I think it's a very helpful book for us as young people, older people as well. It's helpful for anyone, right? But it's such a good book. And what I see is that it only got 12 chapters, so it could be like, it's a short book, and it got game. And who don't want to be put on game? You know what I mean? But yeah, it's such a beautiful chapter, and I've been enjoying reading it. And so I think that brings us to the end of another beautiful podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, always remember that God has your back. Always remember that just because you're in a current season right now doesn't mean that you won't be in a new season whenever God has for it, and understand that the Lord has your back and that his plan is always the best plan. And so with that being said, it has been your boy DGS2. Thank you all for listening to talking to myself once again. I was going to say leave a like, comment, subscribe, but this isn't YouTube, you know. If you enjoyed the podcast, you know, let me know. Message me, DM me, leave a 5-star rating or wherever you listen to your podcast. And Sila, we move. God is good. Thank you so much. And we move!